zooming in right as I do an intro. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of the Magus Brothers podcast. I am Tyler, and with me always is the majestic.
Hello, everybody. I'm Feyerbrand, and thank y'all for joining us on another episode. I can't believe we're on 19 already. We're like, next one's going to be 20, and
yeah, then we're going to be
jokes.
in the twos, the two X's.
We're going to be real boys.
Woohoo!
But yeah, welcome everybody. We're going to be continuing into Final Fantasy VIII and why we love it and why we hope to convince you that maybe it's not as bad as you actually thought it is. So,
or if you love it, then you can just kind of come in and hang out with us, and vibe with what we're saying.
Yeah, come get some confirmation bias with us if you already love the game.
Get some validation.
We'll feed into those. Yeah, exactly that need for validation. Come be that circle jerk with us about this game.
So I'm gonna start this tonight, and it's us, so we're gonna do all of this out of order because it's us. But
I expect it no way else.
On this, I have intentionally not text you this because I knew I was gonna open up with this tonight. And it was just going to be like a potentially controversial opinion. But here we go. I have decided that while Cloud in Final Fantasy VII is pretty much my favorite, Squall has better character development than Cloud. In my opinion, subjectively. Hear me out. So, I believe that while Cloud has great development, he starts off with like that really kind of dickish bravado that we all know why he has that in Soldier, and I only care about the money, etc., etc. His development mostly comes from, and it's almost like steps. It's not gradual. It's just like a huge 90-degree plateau until the next story element happens, and then he's kind of changed for a little bit. But really, his big character development happens when we find out about his subconsciousness, right? And who he really is, et cetera, and the way he talks and the way he sees things kind of does change. But that happens so late in the game in Final Fantasy VII that we don't really get to sit down and hang out with real Cloud all that much. Like, think about it. Like, most of the game you're dealing with, fake Cloud, I'm going to call it. And so you get Cloud late in the game, and you have like, 2 more missions that you have to do with huge materia, and then you go back to the City of the Ancients, do the Midgar section, and then you make a beeline straight for Sephiroth, and like, that's really the end of the game. And like, you've got all the side content that you can do, like side story stuff and like post game materia grinding or chocobo racing, but like, you don't really get a lot of Cloud's personality in those because they're all optional things. Whereas I feel like Squall, you deal with Squall so much, like pure Squall, not Squall pretending to be somebody else. Cloud most of the game is basically pretending or believes he's somebody else. You get Squall, and you get his internal dialogue, whether he's in his room talking to himself or like tossing and turning in bed and like basically having that like angsty internal teenage monologue with himself. And like, he slowly does develop feelings for Rinoa, and then he's assessing those feelings. His relationship with his friends are changing. It's far more gradual, and instead of that like staggered step system, you get this nice gentle curve of development with Squall's personality. And then even then, when he finally like really kind of opens up and is okay with being vulnerable, leaps into space with saving Rinoa, which is such a huge pivotal moment for him. You've still got Squall for a while after that, and like, there's still a fair amount of story to continue on. I just feel like there's more character development with Squall throughout the course of 8. I'm not saying that Squall is a better character, because I still like Cloud more. I want to be clear there. But the development and the narrative of the game lends itself for him to have more development and growth than Cloud did, because 75% of Final Fantasy VII, Cloud is pretending to be somebody else or what the hell ever version of words you want to use there. Controversial take. How do you feel about that?
That that kind of felt like a punch in the gut. Not in a bad way, but just like it was literally so controversial. At least controversial within the circles we run in, and I feel controversial within the greater Final Fantasy fandom. Like, I don't think I've ever heard that take before. And I like dig down in the deepest trenches of Reddit for things like this. And if anybody goes into the deepest trenches of Reddit, you know the kind of weird stuff you tend to read on there, and you're questioning humanity.
And I want to clarify, like, I'm not saying that Squall's got the best character growth of
No,
any
I know.
protagonist. It's truly just in a comparison between like my favorite, like, you know, looking at it critically. And again, it's my opinion.
And you're entitled to it.
Debate is open. But yeah, that's kind of my take. I've been thinking about that for a while.
That's kind of hot. I kind of like it. You definitely provided a good argument, but like, while we do get more of Squall, is his arc actually better than Cloud's?
I don't know if it's better, because that's the thing, is that I certainly can't say whether it's better, because again, at the end of the day, I like 7 more and I enjoy Cloud more, and 90% of that could be nostalgia, which I'm entitled to. I just think that subjectively, Squall has more growth, and we can, hash out back and forth whether that growth makes it better, whether the story's better, whether the character's actually better. I just think it's more development for the character itself.
So, but does Cloud actually have growth? Would you classify him as growth, or would you just classify him as, yeah, that's not who you were, this is who you are? Like,
consider it would come down to whether we were really looking at the confines of just 7, because if we're looking at strictly OG 7, Cloud, in my opinion, doesn't. There's parts of growth, but it's not as much growth. I feel like you get a lot of you see Cloud's kind of personality shift and open up when Aerith gets in the picture, and when Tifa is around, there is some variation there, and then especially when you're in Cloud's subconscious, there we go. You get some nuance to the backstory and stuff like that. You see a younger Cloud, you see that story with Tifa and the history, and then the way he talks and the way he opens up with the party afterwards. But they're really singular experiences. But while 7 is great, there is so much nuance that gets lost in 7 that is because of it being an older game, very punchy. They don't have a lot of the things that we rely on for nuance in a modern storytelling, whether that's voice acting, really emotive, things just in 7. In 7 Remake alone, there was so much nuance that we got to see through the way the characters interacted, like when Cloud would touch Tifa and keep his hand there a little longer, or like facial reactions, there's
it's more of a movie than a video game.
And that's not there in OG 7. So a lot of the ways that we interpret a character is headcanon, and the way we've told the story to ourselves with our understanding of the compendium and thinking about that story over decades at this point.
Right.
But if you look at the compilation of 7, like, Cloud has a lot of growth. Just look at Advent Children for one. There's a lot of growth in just that. There's growth in the novelizations with On the Way to a Smile. So Cloud does have a lot of development, but if we just look at it from strictly 7 and 8, Squall has a lot more growth, in my opinion, and I think that a huge part of that is, one, the story that 8 is telling and the character that Squall happens to be within that story.
No, I definitely think a lot of it has to do with the story, for sure, with 8. Absolutely. Because as we kind of touched on in our last episode, eight is about Squall and Renoa's love story and the war going on around them in their love story. It's very Romeo and Juliet-ish, where it's, you know, it's these two lovers in the middle of a massive conflict that's larger than them, but they're involved in it. I don't know if Romeo and Juliet is a good comparison. Mary, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a degree of very less obvious tragedy there, but it is kind of like this whole like
I wasn't going for the
lover.
Yeah, I wasn't going for the tragedy portion. It was just more of like the focus of the story is them and what's happening with their relationship in the middle of massive amounts of other things that are happening, you know, emotional.
Well, and I think that's a great point to touch on too, is that Final Fantasy VIII, from my understanding, and we've discussed this in early parts of the podcast, but for listeners jumping in here, I have not played Final Fantasies 1 through 5.
Oh, that's right.
There are love stories within Final Fantasy that were present before 8, and I recognize that. There is a huge part of the fan base within 7 that really tackles the idea of shipping in 7, where, you know, I saw a funny tweet where it was like there's 2 types of people in the fan base for 7. One who thinks that it is a love triangle and the other who thinks it's an RPG. And I think that that's really funny. But the story about 7 is not about... I will argue this, and hopefully I don't get attacked for this, but the story of 7 is not about a love story. That's not what 7 is about.
Right.
There is some, you know, facets of love in there.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to tackle that. But 8, and I played 6, and again, there are facets about love in there, but really 8 was like the first Final Fantasy that I'm aware of where it really honed in on this. It was a love story. Like, again, it's bigger than just that, but the main character was blatantly in love with Renoa, and she reciprocated it, and it was a very big part of 8. And really, that wasn't present in such an obvious way up until 8. Would you agree? Am I wrong?
I would. I mean, there is like Final Fantasy IV, which out of 1 through 5 is the first one I want you to play. But 4, you know, there is a love story between Cecil and Rosa, and like that exists, and he wants to go and save her, but it's not his only motivation, and it's there, but it's not. And I don't know if it's because of the writing at the time.
It's very like I mean, again, the dialogue starting out from 1, moving through the games, like dialogue was just so much punchier back then, and you had to fit so much into just small little boxes of text, and the storytelling quality was just not as great as it is nowadays. So like, while there may be a love story there, I could definitely see it not being of the quality that we're talking about with like 8 and even later 10 or, you know, 15.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll argue about the love story in 15 later, but you know what I mean.
Right. And I think I would say if there was a game that had a love story, a Final Fantasy game prior to 8, it was 100% is going to be Final Fantasy IV with Cecil, the main character, and Rosa. Because, but I don't know, because there's so much more. I can't say. That's difficult. That's a difficult thing for me to just really give a definitive opinion on right off the bat, because I haven't played Final Fantasy IV in like 2 or 3 years, and my memory of it is kind of shaky, and I also didn't play it going into it thinking to look for those kind of things. So it's difficult for me to give you a definitive opinion of mine right now on if I think 4 was the first Final Fantasy with like a major love story, because it did have a love story. Like, that's not up for debate, but was it as big as 8's? I don't know. Let us know in our Discord.
And even beyond just 8, because Final Fantasy IV sounds like there was a love story there, but even 8 goes to me, it's beyond this idea of just, Squall and Renoa fall in love, and it's these 2 protagonists that are in love with each other. We touched on this in the last episode, but it was the love story between Laguna and Julia, then Laguna and Rain,
Yeah. No, yeah.
and like their parents and the fate, bringing the almost like this missed opportunity with their parents, but they were born in this like fated, lovers. It was almost like there's this destiny aspect to their
Absolutely.
love.
And then
So it's
Eyes on Me, like, come on.
it's even bigger than just like, oh, the protagonist. It was it's one of the reasons, like I said, that like while Yuna and Tidus's story is cool and a great love story, and so many people probably remember that as the quintessential Final Fantasy love story, and there was definitely it's hard to beat that moment where I forget what the name of the woods they're in, but like that big cutscene with the song where I was like Macalania, but I don't know if that's right, where they kiss and it's the big beautiful cutscene. Like that's hard to beat, with the visual display there. But there's so many more moving pieces to Squall and Renoa's love story that it just, to me, like their love story is the quintessential Final Fantasy love story. That's what I think of when I think of a romance in Final Fantasy,
Yeah, it's interesting.
Again, personal opinion.
Yeah, well, yeah, everything in here is our opinions. We are not stating these things as fact, other than the fact that it is our opinions. Like 8's, I don't know, like when I played 10, even as a child, like, I played 8 and 10 as like when they came out, like release. So in 1999, when Final Fantasy VIII came out, I was 11. Okay. So what did I understand about love then? Probably nothing. What do I understand about it now? Maybe a little bit more.
Maybe a little more.
But I can tell you this. I played 8 when I was 11, and I played 10 probably when I was like 12 or 13. And I didn't even, for some reason, this sticks out in my brain, but like, I don't really remember equating 10 to having a love story. But I do remember romanticizing the crap out of 8. Like, I even said that, like, one of my most vivid memories of being a teenager was getting my heart broken for the first time. And what do? I go and play Final Fantasy VIII because I wanted to sit there and bake and stew in my angst and my sadness and my depression. So I was like, I'm going to play a game that has all sorts of lovey-dovey feelings. It's, when you're sad, you listen to sad music and, about love. And I chose Final Fantasy VIII then. I didn't choose Final Fantasy X. What does that say? I was a dumb teenager. Who knows? I don't know what that says. But even as a kid, when I knew nothing about anything, I always thought 8 had the bigger love story. Like 10's was on the side. 10's was like the love story became the focus at later. The end, like with Tidus disappearing at the end and all of that. That's when it became it. And 10-2 was focused on that. 8's was almost from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, even 8 even opens up with the trailer. I call it the trailer, but you know what I mean. The intro cinematic where it's like, Squall and Renoa going into their arms, and like the logo is, them hugging and stuff like that. So it's really setting you up far earlier for it.
Oh yeah, that's what is the logo. It's like Squall and Renoa hugging. Yeah. What's 10's? Is it Beject?
I think it's just Yuna like doing the sending. I think let's verify. I think it's Yuna just doing her sending.
Final Fantasy X logo. It's Yuna on the left side. I guess she's summoning.
I thought it was like when she does the sending on like the water, where she's like sending the souls back to the far plane.
That's exactly what it is, I guess. I don't know though. It's kind of interesting because like the left-hand side, that's exactly what it looks like. 100%. I'm not debating that. She's like doing her sending as the water spout came up, but then it's a long, wide logo, and then the bottom, it slowly starts changing from like that bluish color up into like a red fire. I don't know. Like, is that supposed to still represent the sending, or is that supposed to represent something else? Like, I
think either way, our point is that it's not her macking on Tidus. It's just Yuna.
Yeah, it's because she's the focus of the story. It's not
Yuna's the protagonist of Final Fantasy X. Fight me.
No, I agree because Yuna's my favorite. I love Yuna. She's it's
Uh,
100% her story.
but kind of going back to 8, 8 really is setting up that whole like they're the focus very early
Right.
on in the game, whether it's the cinematic for a new game, whether it's the logo. And I think that that's a testament to 8, where even for us, which again we're just two white dudes talking about talking about Final Fantasy.
Why do we gotta be
Um,
white?
but yeah, I don't know, we're white dudes. But it's a testament to the story that Final Fantasy VIII is telling, where this love story can be so moving and important for us. For it even just being a text-based video game, where you know each Final Fantasy, they typically get better with the presentation, and whether it's voice acting, storytelling, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Whereas we have 8, and that's what we think of when we think of the love story. We don't think of 10, which I think is fairly different for a lot of people. I think a lot of people do think of 10, and that's valid. But kind of going back to the plot, theme, story, et cetera, a huge theme of Final Fantasy VIII is love, this romance, and not just again, like we touched on, not just Squall and Renoa, but Laguna, Julia,
Hmm.
General Calloway, Rain. There is a big this love that spans, I was going to say generations, but really I guess it's 2 generations. But this fated destiny type love is a big part of the story.
Right.
And I would say it's one of the most prominent themes that Final Fantasy VIII deals with. Certainly
Absolutely.
not the only one, but a huge one.
I mean, even Sid and Edea,
Yeah,
however you want to say her name. That was even a
I always
big
said
thing.
media.
Edea, that was even a big thing when you find out that, oh my
He's
God,
trying to assassinate his own wife. I was like, oh damn.
yeah. And then, he ends up like retiring when she's saved.
He's
He's
like,
like,
I'm out.
well, see you later. I'm going to go hang out with my old lady. Come talk to us if you want to win some cards. And like, that's just kind of it.
Yeah, and um, Irvine, his character, he's for being for being very, I don't want to say it's certainly, I'd have to go back and reassess it. I don't know that he's misogynistic, but he's very flirtatious and constantly trying to hit chicks up in a not particularly tight way. But Irvine's looking for love, and ultimately, I think by the end of the game, we are left to believe that him and Selphie are developing some sort of relationship there. Um,
Right.
you know, and he's certainly through the arc of the story, trying to make her feel better, trying to be there for her. And I don't remember where that particularly takes by the end of the story. I don't think we ever really even find out. But it's there. Um, but moving away from the theme of love in the story, I found it interesting. Final Fantasy VIII is a very anime like. I mean, one, they're all from Japan, so you can make this argument a lot. But like the idea that this is a school, like they're going to a school, and we get this sort of like early on in the game, this whole like there's written tests that you can do, and there's field missions, and there's like a classrooms you're running around, and like it's
Right.
almost like a big college campus. It's got that tropey anime academy thing that a lot of
Yep.
animes have, where they're like training to be this or that, and like there's brutal violent stuff going on, but then like you go back to school and like there's dances and stuff, and we don't get the whole it certainly never goes like the persona angle, where like you're developing relationships and really focusing on the
Thankfully.
minutia of all of that. But 8 does have that whole school aspect to it, and I feel like the game, I don't want to say quickly abandons that, but pretty quickly, it starts
Right.
to that quits being the focus.
For sure.
But for a long time, because of the art and the presentation of it, and because I was young when I first played this game, I thought of the characters as so much older. And everyone gives Squall grief as I think Squall being the most emo Final Fantasy protagonist there is. It's either him or Cloud. But Squall gets a big brunt of it. But as I played it, being an adult and getting a little bit wiser, man, give Squall some grace. Like that dude's been through some stuff. Like he is a
Yeah.
teenager thrust into, being trained as a mercenary to assassinate witches and being an orphan and
Has no memory of
uh
his childhood.
yeah, which we'll get to memory. Has no memory of his childhood and then being like forced to like by adults in his life to lead a war effort
Right?
and command and all of these things. Like, dude, I'd toss around in my bed and cry a little bit too.
Yeah, dude, I know everyone gave him such a hard time, and like during my slow play, I was bringing up the fact like, what out of all of these people in Garden, okay, when Sid leaves and steps down, they're like, "Here you go, Squall. You've been a seed for 3 days. You're 18 years old. You have no idea who you are. Take over." Instead of, I don't know, the shitloads of freaking staff and teachers and all these other people that are around. Now, obviously we can chalk that up to this is a video game and Squall's the main character and all of that stuff. But let that dude go roll around in his bed, like you said, and contemplate all of his life choices. Like, how did he end up here in his life? Why are they depending on him? I don't know. I have those same questions. I'm 33. I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that. And like, it's a testament to his character development and his character period that he still by the end of the game ends up on the right side of all of this and is able to love and open up and rely on his friends and jump out into space to save the girl and all of that. Like, again, of course that would probably happen because this is a game and fiction and we want all of these things to go that way. But like, just boiling his character down to like, oh, dude's so emo, big old crybaby, like
You can
so much better than that.
You can tell. I think the people who say that and who still say that to this day are the people who played it too young, and they're the people who didn't.
Again.
Yeah, exactly, and they just didn't understand it. I think as an adult, if you play it and you still think that, then I think you're thinking a little too shallow, and you maybe need to think a little more deeply about it.
Because the game has, even again, and I hate doing the comparison to 7, but the game has an interesting parallel to 7 in the very obvious, like we're dealing with Shinra and the military and the corporate owned idea of, we talked about 7 with this idea of capitalism, and a company turns into the government and they have their own privatized army that they use to enforce everything, and it's conveyed in a very dark way, a very negative light. And then we get to 8 and there's militaries, but the militaries really, I mean, Estar, however you want to pronounce it, they obviously have like a military force, but any other military force in the world comes from the Gardens. It's these SeeDs, these mercenaries that are all trained at a school, like children's soldiers, and like it's tonally different. Like we're rooting for these, and we're like, yeah, this is great. Like,
it's awful.
Yeah, but like, let's take a step back, and you're like, ooh, this is not tight. And they're being trained for like these to assassinate witches, but then like Galbadia Garden gets all tied up from that in the wrong way, and then the schools go to war with each other, and it's just the idea of military is very there in 8 in a similar fashion to 7, but tonally presented different. But it's still dark and messed up. Like we're still dealing with war. We're still dealing with Shinra was experimenting on soldiers and getting people to join up very early and stuff like that. And with Seed and the Gardens, they're taking these orphans and training them. And granted, they're not experimenting on anyone, to thank goodness that we're aware of in the games, but like they're conscripting child soldiers and training them, but again, it's presented in a way where we're like, yay, go team.
And that's the thing, dude. Like you could draw so many parallels between the way they're writing their narrative in these games to where, like in the real world, when you hear about child soldiers, like in Africa, they're using child soldiers or whatever to go help them murder villages and stuff. You're like, this is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. But then within the context of Final Fantasy VIII and the way they, show us the game and the story and the world and the way they present everything, we do cheer them on, just like you said. And it's scary to think that, like, if you knew nothing in real life and then all of a sudden you were introduced to child soldiers here in real life in the exact same way, you might be cheering them on too, even though we know as not civilized, but like as evolved human beings that it's wrong. It's crazy. It's just crazy. And that's a crazy point that you brought up, and it's a weird thing to think about. And because like Final Fantasy VIII is totally freaking screwed, dude. Like it's all like, so if you think about it,
it's not presented in like this dark, gritty, dystopian.
No, they made the gardens. They made the gardens sound like the saviors because, oh no, Squall and everybody, they were in an orphanage, and then we got sent to garden. Oh my gosh, how lucky were they?
That, but like the aesthetic, it's like, yes, this garden was designed by Apple, and
That's right.
all of these. It's just very like obviously like even the music when you're in garden running around and like you've got the bells and stuff.
It's like it's North Korea, dude.
Like, it's just very like
it's
presenting,
like,
and like in 7, it's very just like, oh yeah, we live in the slums under a plate, and like. It's sucking them, it's presented different, and like the whole aesthetic of 8 is very different, and so like it gives you a different vibe and a different headspace for this place.
Yeah, dude. And like I feel like garden, especially Balam, it's like those videos you see that come out of North Korea where they're showing their best foot, like their big fake foot of oh yeah, everyone here's so happy. They have access to the internet. Everything's good. And then you get down to the nitty gritty and we're using children to murder everybody. And you're like,
yeah. And they're sending them out like, here's your test mission to see what your rank is going to be and to see what your pay is. Like, go have fun. And then like, smash cut, and you've got the party running from a giant mechanical spider that's self-repairing through like Dalit that's trying to murder them, and they're just like booking it.
Could you imagine having been doing that at like the age of 17?
Right?
But they're not even phased. They're like, yeah, I'll just pull out my giant lightning bird, and that's no big deal.
Oh, speaking of giant lightning bird. Criticism. I feel like memory. I don't want to say memory is a primary theme, but memory is an important part of 8 because it's almost like we talked about this, but the big tie-in with these characters you find out later is that they were all at the same orphanage and stuff like that, and they were all friends when they were young. And we miss out on that because they don't remember these things. They don't remember that they knew each other. Come to find out that this is because of GFs, and the GFs have this function where you give up memory to essentially be able to wield them. I have thought about this mechanic also, and I don't like it. And what I mean by don't like it, let me rephrase. I don't like how it's presented because it feels too convenient. Like if GFs were responsible for memory and all of this, I feel like there should have been more hints or groundwork laid early on. It feels really convenient late in game for it to be like, oh, GFs mess with your memory, and this is why we don't remember each other from this orphanage. Like, I feel like the writers, and again, there's probably so many reasons for this, and somebody could get in here, but to me, it feels like the writers were like, we want them to not remember that they all went to school together, and we want that to be a big reveal, but we don't have a convenient way to make them have these memories lost as being kids. Oh, GF should take memories. That's great. Let's do that.
And then never talk about it ever again.
Yeah, never really address it outside of this. And it's like, I feel like more could have been done with that.
So basically, they admitted to giving kids brain cancer in this video game world, and then just never.
Equipping GFs give you brain damage.
You're literally getting brain cancer or damage from these things. And you like selfie admitted. She's like, yeah, I found one in a monster when I was a little kid, when I first got to Trabia or whatever. So, like, kids are just finding these.
Yeah. There's a whole thing there that the game just like lightly touches on to explain why they don't remember at each other at school, and I'm just like, I feel like this is important. We should address this some more.
Yeah, it was definitely sort of like it felt shoehorned in, and then also sort of just like, yeah, this is a thing, but what you gonna do? Moving on. It's like that meme, like, oh no. Anyways.
Yeah. So, I just kind of touch on that. Memories a theme, all of this, but like that just feels,
maybe they forgot to include more.
Yeah.
No.
If 8 ever gets remade, I hope that that's touched on. I hope it gets touched on a little more. I would like more there. If you're going to make GFs work off of memory or something like that, because memory is a big thing in a lot of Final Fantasies, like even just with 8, like, or 7, like how long have we talked about and listened to videos on YouTube about memories, this life stream, that, and et cetera, like
never being a memory. And
yeah. And then, we've got 10 where the faith, memories are a big thing with the faith. Like memory is a huge thing in all of Final Fantasy, and so they're no stranger to tackling these esoteric ideas about memory, but like,
right.
feel like more could have been done with the GF system and memory. You could have hinted at it earlier or done more interesting things with it, and then I just felt like it, like you said, was kind of shoehorned in there at the end. I don't know.
I guess
it felt very convenient.
I guess we got to chalk this one up to the fact that both 8 and 9 were being developed simultaneously. Like that's something a lot of people. I don't know if I can't say if people tend to forget that or if they don't want to take that into consideration, but like that's massive, dude. 8 and 9 were being developed at the same time. They were released like within a year of each other. Like 8 came out in 99, 9 came out in 2000, and then we got 10 in like 2001 or 2. So 10 was probably even being developed there towards the end of 9's development. And like all these people say how much they love 9, but I disagree with them. And like 8, is so. I don't think 8 is as divisive as it used to be. I think now, like especially our generation, now that so many people are replaying it as adults, and then there's newer, younger generations that are coming in that have, learning about mental health and issues and struggles at a younger age. So they're more willing to understand and accept like the struggle Squall's going through. Because, like I was raised that you don't have emotions. You just shut up and go be the good soldier. That's, that's basically how I was raised.
So was Squall.
And like, that's what Squall was like, but he was thinking all the things that, we weren't allowed to think or say. And so like I could see people resenting him. He's not supposed to think that way. And on like 8, I don't think 8 is as divisive as it used to be anymore. I think it still carries that stigma, but like when you get down to it, a lot of people like Final Fantasy VIII these days. If any of you listeners, if you go out there into the communities, 8 is not pooped on as much as some
other ones.
Some people want you to believe it is, or the way people make it sound. It's not. 8 is actually really well liked out there, especially by the newer players. I've noticed, like I've seen a lot of posts where people will say, I just played through Final Fantasies 1 through 10 and here's, what I thought about each one. And a lot of the time you'll see Final Fantasy VIII top 3, if not top 2. People are really liking 8. It's different. That's a great game.
I love 8. I will say that in my replaying of Final Fantasies, I certainly don't love. Actually, no, I'm going to rephrase that. I love 8, I think, as much, if not more, than I always did. But there are other Final Fantasies I have come to appreciate more, namely Final Fantasy X. I have come to love that story more than I did when I was younger. I will say that Final Fantasy VIII and X, we kind of touched on this last episode, suffers from the same problem of the overall cast being weak to me in comparison to like 7 or 14. And
14.
Dude, don't get me started on the Scions in 14. I love them. But yeah, I wish the cast came off better overall. But the main characters are really, really good. Like Yuna from 10 is just so good.
Oh, she's so good.
Even though I consider Yuna the protagonist, Tidus' role in the story and being kind of like those, for the lack of a better word, virgin or alien eyes in this new world where he understands nothing is such a well done vehicle for us as the player being exposed to the world.
Absolutely.
And like Tidus being our voice, like that's done so well that like, you know, I'm not saying that Tidus has bare minimum personality, but even if the character had bare minimum personality, but still let us, it was that same function where like that is the vehicle for us experiencing the world, and he's basically saying all the things that we'd be saying with the bare minimum personality, it'd still be great because that method of viewing the world and the storytelling was just so good. But yeah, they both suffer from weak overall casts, but we've went on the tangent. Another big theme in 8 that I kind of wanted to hone in on was this idea of the witches, which I feel like
sorceresses.
Yeah,
you keep calling them witches, and I'm like, witch? What?
Witch, sorceress? Isn't it called the?
Oh, there's. Is it called the Sorceresses War? It's all
Sorceresses War. I was like, I thought it was, for some reason I had War of the Witches in my head, but maybe
I don't know. But that sounds
alliteration in a different way.
That sounds pretty cool.
But the idea of like the way the sorceresses pass on power and have always been a thing, and they're still like a thing in the future. Like Ultimecia is from the future, and sorceresses are still going on there. And I really feel like there's an untapped story with the idea of like sorceresses even before like we had Adele, even before then. Like how long have sorceresses been around in 8?
Well,
like before
I think
we ever in the story,
all of them had their powers because Ultimecia. She's the one who went back in time and gave them powers.
Like even to like the very first witch or sorceress, all the way back into the beginning, wherever this line of sorcery starts.
I think that's kind of what we're led to believe.
I'd have to look into that. I've never really looked into that. But the idea of like these powers and like there being a sorceress all through time is interesting. And this idea of the way that it can let you be possessed, and because when Edea transfers her powers, because they go to Renoa, right? That's where Renoa gets her powers, is from Edea, and Edea no longer can use her powers. It's like this. It's almost like
that's because Ultimecia was giving Edea her powers, and then she gave them to Renoa.
But Adele is imprisoned, and Adele also has powers.
That's because Renoa goes and gives them to her.
But doesn't Renoa retain her sorcery powers through the end of the game? Like, because even in her limit breaks, like she still got it.
No, I don't think so. Not that I remember.
I thought she maintained her sorceress powers even after that. I mean, even if
they use the lunar cry to knock Adele or whatever her name is out of her spatial prison.
I just keep thinking of like the actual singer Adele.
So
like that's just
I don't know. I can't remember her actual name in the game, but it's something like Adele. That. But it's spelled different.
Like, yeah, it's like ADL and not like ADL, ADELE or whatever the singer. But I can't stop thinking about it. I am a
sorceress. I will put a spell on you.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so no, like Renoa, like her whole thing is Renoa's mind is taken over by Ultimecia, and she goes out into space, and she goes over and releases the locks on the front of Adele's prison, and they
Right.
use the lunar cry to drop her to Earth, or whatever the heck the planet's called. But I think we fight her and kill her, and then I guess the powers go
Back to Renoa, because
Yeah,
isn't Renoa part of the plan to do the end with
it
Ultimecia?
was supposed to be Adele.
Yeah, but then it ends up being Renoa.
Yeah, because we kill her.
Yeah.
Because we kill her.
I don't
guess
know if
that's
there
fine.
can only ever be one sorceress at a time. I don't know if this is like a Highlander thing.
There can only be one.
The idea, the way sorcery, like a true sorceress, like, right? Because 8, again, drawing parallels to 7, nobody innately in 8 can really just cast magic.
Correct.
Like, it's all done by like GFs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Similar to where like in 7, it's through materia and such like that. But it's just a sorceress that has this innate magical power.
Yes.
There's a lot going on that I wish we got more story from there. Like, I just like the sorcery angle is really cool in 8, and like, was there always a sorceress? Were they always bad? Because Renoa's not innately bad as a sorceress, even a little bit. She is when she got possessed, but like, she wasn't possessed the entire time, because she's still like, Squall rescues her after she initiates the lunar cry, and she's still got the powers, and she's not being possessed at that point.
Well, yeah, I guess that's when she like willfully turned herself over to Esther.
Yeah.
And then we break into there, and I need to finish this slow play of this game. Like, I remember it, but I don't have those minor details fresh in my memory. I need to finish.
Because there's like that whole point where, you go and bust her out, and like, it's that whole like, she falls, and it's that slow-mo fall that's in the trailer intro where like she's falling and Squall turns to like catch her. But again, having powers doesn't always mean that you are evil. You are open to possession from Ultimecia. There's just a lot going on with that sorceress angle there. We need like an 8 prequel well before 8 with like the original War of the Sorceress and stuff like that. That would be tight.
I mean, I don't know about like a whole prequel, but definitely something. They could have dropped us like a book, a graphic novel.
Give me a movie or something.
I don't know if I can do more Final Fantasy movies. Honestly, after Kingsglaive and everything that was 15, and then like Advent Children was cool and everything, but was it? I don't know. I have so many feelings.
I want more. I want some Netflix shows. Give me 9. Give me 7 as a Netflix show. I just want more media for Final Fantasy in general. And then we can talk about whether they were bad. Because they just need to release these movies, so we've got content to talk about. Let's be real.
Dude, there's like 35 games or something. We got plenty of content.
I know. Oh man. But anyway, the sorceress angle is very cool, and I feel like more could be done there. Again, whenever they get to remaking 8, because let's be real, they should just remake every Final Fantasy as our lifetime goes on. So whenever we get back to 8 getting its time in the sun, let's get more on this whole GF memory thing. Let's get more on this whole sorceress war. I'm just saying.
Well,
we need
like,
some more sorcerer stuff.
Let's pretend King for a Day, and you made that happen. Like, you greenlit the project. That was it. Like, you didn't have any other say in it. If it was the same team or whatever that's doing 7, it absolutely would be fleshed out. I think every single plot hole and everything with 7 is going to be answered, and when we're done with the 7 remake compilation, we're not going to have anything unanswered other than things that the devs wanted unanswered. So
yeah,
if an 8 one ever happened, it absolutely would be that way.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that 7 is unique because we touched on this before. Where 7, I feel like, is Square Enix's cash cow, aside from 14, because of the way it's an MMO. 7's their cash cow, and they've already, in their last thing, talked about like various offshoots they've already have ideas for with 7. And while I feel like the compilation will answer a lot of questions, I fortunately, I don't know. I'm not trying to say negative or positive about it, but see them taking 7 and doing as much as they can with 7 because we're going to eat it all.
Well, I mean, look at First Soldier.
Yeah. Whereas, if we're going off of the NVIDIA leaks, which we're not going to cover everything with the NVIDIA leaks because there just seems to be more and more coming true based off of what was leaked, like with the Chrono Cross remaster coming out. It's looking more and more like there is going to be a Final Fantasy IX remake, because that was one of the NVIDIA things leaked, along with a remaster for Tactics, which I don't want to get into too much, but we're doing these comparisons. I think 8, if it ever does get remastered, similar to 9, when they remaster 9, I don't see them doing a ton of offshoots for 9. Like, I feel like they'll remaster 9 and then leave it be. 7.
Well, would it be a remaster or a remake?
Sorry, remake. When they remake 9, because I believe it was called, as a remake for 9, a remaster for Tactics. If they remake 9, I don't see them doing a bunch of offshoots for the game. I don't see them doing like a First Soldier or an Ever Crisis or like all these spin-offs for it. They'll just remake 9 and that'll be it. I feel like 8 would get the same thing. I feel like 10, if they remake 10 down the road, would probably get more. I feel like they will do more with 10. But 8 and 9, I don't think would get that.
I honestly,
I don't know what they do with 10, but like 10 is like up there, like with a favorite of Japan. 10,
is their number one.
It's that transcendence that 7 does, where like 8 and 9 don't hit that level. I don't know what they would do with 10, but I could see them doing something more than just a remake of 10 down the road. You know what I mean? I don't know what it would be, but I feel like 10 could get that attention.
Wild speculation, because that's what we're doing. I don't know if they do anything major like that with 10, because 10 was fully voice acted, which means if they were going to remake it, they would either bring all of those people back or have to bring in new people. And could you imagine like the Final Fantasy fandom losing their minds if they had different voice actors?
I get what you're saying, but 10 is one of those games where we have 10, 10.2, and then 10.2.5, which was that novelization or play after it. And there is more story there in just 10. And I feel like if they broach the remake thing with 10, there's a lot more they would have to address with the story, and just remaking 10 and then walking away. There's a lot of like post story there that would have to get addressed somehow. So like if they remake 10, which again, no idea if they ever would, but like if they do, there's a lot to unpack there than just 10. And I don't know how that would end up being presented.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they should. I think if they're going to do remakes, they should do 1 through 9 and then focus on some of their more successful spin-offs like Tactics. Give me more.
I think 1 through 9 is valid. 10, they had the HD remaster. It was already voiced in all of these things. That what they need to do is just remake or do like an Final Fantasy 10 10.2 remaster 0.5, and then the only new options they add is for the ability to skip cutscenes.
I would pay $150 for that.
Boosted battle speed or something like that. Like
boosted battle speed already exists on the PC version of it, which is kind of poopy. Like
console version.
The console version, which it was the remaster for 10 and 10.2 came out on PS3 actually. And then they re-released it on PS4, and then it eventually came out on PC. Well, I guess it was like PS4 and Xbox, and then PC. I don't know the Xbox side of stuff. I'm sorry, Xbox people. But, so PS3 and PS4 didn't have any of the boosters. And then the PC one had like the 4 times speed. All the other good stuff, like you could instantly max out your sphere grid. You could have max and infinite items, max gil. Like you could have all this stuff, and that's the only one that they did it where the PC had it and the console did not, and it kind of
interesting choice.
And it stinks. The PC came out last. I think they should definitely add in the ability to skip cutscenes, and then add in all the boosters and release it as a patch for the consoles and then drop a PS5 version of it physical that I can go buy, because I personally like the PS5 cases the most.
I agree. I think we have turned the Final Fantasy VIII discussion into talking about things they need to do with the franchise. So let's steer this back.
Oh,
to
that's
Final
right.
Fantasy
We're
VIII.
talking about Final Fantasy VIII, dude.
But
what do
anyway,
I know?
So 8, the sorcery aspect, again, I would love for them to touch more on this, because I find it interesting, and I would love for them to do more there. And in doing more there, again, we kind of touched on this in the last episode, but like, show us Ultimecia early and give us more of her as a character, to make her less esoteric and just like this idea that shows up real late game that like we can't really connect with. I'm not saying that every villain needs to be a Sephiroth in the way where it's like understanding what they are as a character and their motivations, or like an Emmett Selk or an Arden, where we need to like really empathize with them as a character, but like also give us more. Don't make this like a what was the character in 9 that showed up real late game, like out of nowhere as your Necron as your final boss. Like, give us something more, guys.
I agree, dude. Like, it's one of my biggest gripes with both 8 and 9 is just the like the bait and switch. Like, you're chasing down somebody in both 8 and 9, Aidea and Kuja, and then eventually just bait and switch that shit on you.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it's
jarring.
Kuja late in 9. At least they tapped Aidea out fairly like earlier at least.
I would say 3-ish quarters roughly of the game is when Aidea gets tapped out. But like, you're right, like Kuja's like, wait,
last second.
Yeah, because you think you're fighting Kuja and you're like, this is the last boss, and then you beat him, and then Necron pops in. Psych, motherfucker, I'm the last boss. So yeah, and so then you're just like, who? Whereas like at least in 8, you're like, I'm going through Ultimecia's castle. Once I know that.
Even then, like, you have this whole story, like you realize that Aidea wasn't in control of her senses, and she passed on her powers, and Renoa becomes possessed, and then you've got Adele, and then you have to fight Adele, and then there's a whole plan about how you're going to fight Ultimecia and allow time compression to happen to defeat her, and it's like this whole thing. Like, even there's a lot going on with Ultimecia. Like, I guess my whole big beef is just like, it's more conceptual. She's not there, and she's not tangible or physical, which I get this time compression, and the idea of time doesn't really allow it, but like, introduce the idea of Ultimecia earlier, or make her a more severe threat. It's just so intangible. Like,
yeah,
she, at least story wise, the name is being tossed around way earlier in the idea of it, but I digress. We don't want to bash on 9 right now. Just would love them to do
that's later
to do something with 8 there. And another thing, the idea of these characters growing up. And while I don't like a lot of I don't want to say I don't like, well, a lot of the characters in 8 don't do a lot for me. I do feel like that they all kind of grow up. Like, even Cypher, has these troubles in growing up. Keistis is growing up in her own way, trying to find herself. Squall, I don't know if I would say Selphie has a lot of character growth, because I don't remember her like.
She basically just shows up as the dissy chick who likes drama. Then her home gets blown up, and then she like runs off with Irvine or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call that an arc.
That's about it. No, there is no arc. There's no arc for her.
Zell gets better. I don't know if Zell gets better by the end of it.
He's just gobbling glizzies the whole game.
So, but there is a lot of character growth as they find themselves through this school, this war, kind of finding themselves, remembering their childhood and the way their personalities interacted even then. And can I just talk about how much Sid sucks? Like, just really thinking about this, going back and
Please.
being like I'm gonna conscript all these children soldiers, and then as soon as they find my wife, I'm gonna retire and bow out, and here you take over, and I'm just gonna spend. Oh my God, Sid sucks.
And then he uses them to murder his investor, Norg.
Boy, oh boy, is Sid problematic.
Yo, dude, he's like just freaking straight up garbage, bro. He's he's like,
isn't he running around in a sweater vest? Like,
he looks like Robin Williams, number one. And number two, he's like all these CEOs now that are like using third world country kids to build phones, and he's
not tight.
So he runs a place that looks like Apple built it while using children illegally. Steve Jobs. See Steve Jobs?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a big negative there.
Steve Jobs is dead. What's the new guy's name? Tim Cook or whatever?
Yeah, I think you're right. But eight juggles a lot of themes. And it, mostly nails all of them. Again, I think that the plot, the story of 8 works well right up until the end. And I'll say that the end doesn't work for me because, again, we're dealing with such an esoteric topic that is, we don't this whole timeline bleed and the future and the past and all of this happens so late, and 8 suffers from that very tropey thing where like the very end gets way too big for the story to kind of contain. And
but was that a trope then? This is a 20-something-year-old game. This is a 23-year-old game.
I don't know if it was a trope then, so maybe trope was the wrong word. But I feel like the ending of 8 gets away from it with this very esoteric idea of, time compression and a villain that's not really done justice by the time you get to the end. There's no real.
I think it was built up to it.
I think it was built up to it, but again,
and it was believable because they introduced the concept of like your consciousness being traveled through time incredibly early in the game, and then they slowly built upon different things to where I think it was easy to digest. Like you started out in the garden, and then you started seeing more technology kind of introduced into the game as things advanced. Then you saw the garden flying, and then you go to space, and then you see the Lunar Cry, the prison. You're seeing Esther. You learn about the Sorceresses, the war, and all that stuff. And like as the game goes on, like if you were looking at the game from the beginning to the end with nothing in the middle, yeah, it's massive difference. But that's how lots of things work. But I don't think it was. I felt it was super easy to digest, and I didn't think it was a massive leap at all. Actually, I know
what
a lot.
I would have liked was if, for example, time compression was the ultimate goal for Ultimecia. I would have liked for there to be more, because we don't really get the whole time compression thing until we're in her castle and like fighting her, and then like time compression's going off. I would have liked to see more gradual things around the world getting messed up to make it more of a, oh my God, like the stakes are high here type of thing, as opposed to like everything's fine and then you go to the castle and that's where stuff goes down and it's a very brief thing. Like I would have loved to see more weird time mechanics going on in the rest of the world leading up to it.
Yeah, we always want to see more stuff, but
I'm just saying I would have loved to see that. But again, this is just me. I just feel like the ending gets a little weird towards the end of it. And but again, that's like overall like a relatively minor complaint. I love 8. I just,
I would say personally, the biggest thing of the ending that I thought was like WTF was when you were fighting Ultimecia and then she merged with Griever. Like,
Yeah, that too. There's so much that happens in the ending in just that castle, those fights, where I'm just like, I don't understand what's going on.
that was really it. And I felt if that castle was twice as long because they were explaining stuff, like why would things were going on, like if it's just a massive lore dump with, you know, the 12 bosses or whatever it is, and then you fight like the 3 or 4 phase Ultimecia, like that could have been done so good to where they're just filling in all those little holes in the plot, and you're like, why am I here, what's going on, why is this happening? Just like you could have had the
with 14. I feel like Ultimecia's castle, instead of it being like, oh, this is the last 4-man and you're going to get a lore dump, I feel like Ultimecia's castle should have been an entire, like, the last zone. That should have been Ultimecia's castle.
Okay, yeah, for using that, like,
a last 4-man dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to describe it. Hopefully most of our listeners have played 14 to understand that comparison. But yeah, so basically that's what it is. It should have been longer with a massive lore dump, because like this is her castle. Like these are her the bosses are there for a specific. We fight Tiamat there and all these other bosses, and it's like, why are they there? Why are they the guards? Explain it. How is Ultimecia doing this? Make me solve a riddle. I think you fight a Sphinx boss in there or something. Make me solve a riddle as to what's happening, and like just do more. And
I do think there is a riddle or two in there, but again, it's like,
yeah, I think you're right.
It could be more tied to the story.
Right, and like there was
us comprehend.
Like there's puzzles of like lighting candles, or was that 9?
I don't remember if there was. The puzzle I remember is like the names of paintings and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Like, dude, that could have been so cool. And I don't know. I think there was. I would love to see that just more.
I think there's ways like ideas that they could have done for us to like make the ending overall more cohesive and better, and maybe we have different ideas there on how this could have been done. But I do think that the ending in various places for us just I don't want to say got weak, but it's like was not up to par with the storytelling through the rest of the story leading up to it.
Yeah.
So
it felt like, I don't think you've ever played this game, but the second disc of Xenogears, where so basically Xenogears ran out of time and money, and the last disc was them literally just explaining everything to you, and that was it. Like it's just a picture, like your character sitting in a chair while someone's telling you everything, and that was kind of the second disc of Xenogears. And I felt like Ultimecia's castle was very close to becoming that. So yeah,
but we digress. 8, again, solid game. We love it. It's definitely up there in top 3 or 4 for me. And I would love to see a remake of it someday. Squall is not emo.
No,
fight me. Squall's a great character. His development and growth is great. I again would arguably say that it's even better than Squall or Cloud, in my opinion.
Come to our Discord. Come tweet at us.
And that the love story in 8 to me is just unparalleled. It's what I think of when I think of a love story within Final Fantasy as a franchise. It's Squall and Rinoa. It's not Tidus and Yuna. It's not Zidane and Garnet. It's not Noctis and Lunafreya. It is Squall and Rinoa.
Yeah, like
it's not Cecil and Rosa.
When I get asked like, hey, I want to play a Final Fantasy game with a great love story, what do you recommend? It's always 8. It's always 8. That's always going to be what it is. Sorry, Final Fantasy 9, but get bleeped.
Also, Rinoa cracks me up. Like, I always forget how great of this bums me out, because when I think of great female characters in Final Fantasy, I think of like Tifa, Aerith, Yuna. Like those are the ones that kind of jump to my mind. And I feel bad because I don't always think of Rinoa first as a strong, capable female protagonist, but like Renoa's real funny. Like, I love Renoa. Every time I play 8, I'm always just like, I always forget how great Renoa is. Like in that dance scene where she just drags Squall to the dance floor, like, nah, bro, you're gonna dance with me. Or like at the date scene where she's making fun of him and she's like, oh, and then you start to do these mannerisms and she's literally copying him while he's doing them. And he like swings at her and she rolls backwards and she's just like, ha! And
making like jokes about the dirty magazines and
yep.
No,
and
she's a fun girl.
You know, pushing people around, and like at one point, like, is it Irvine? She like stuffs him into the tank and her legs are just like sticking out and she's like, we're doing this.
Yeah.
She's just like, she's funny and bossy, and like, you know, she's got a little bit of that spoiled brat daddy like aspect where she's like, you know, locked into his room, and she's got that little like rich girl snobby aspect to her, but like she's really funny and like really fun. And I'm just like, man, I always forget Renoa is a great character. Like,
I know she's always so glossed over.
If you're listening to this podcast, sorry. Sorry for forgetting about you so much. You're great.
We remember now, and we hope all of our listeners remember now. And they pay tribute.
You have one of the best limit breaks because you shoot your dog off your arm like a freaking cannon, and that's so dope. And then you just give it a treat.
She literally like fists her dog's butt and then shoots it. Like, what? Oh my gosh, dude.
Renoa's a trip, man.
She's fantastic. She's great.
And then Whip Mommy. We'll talk about Whip Mommy when we talk about characters in the next episode, but I'll never forget you saying Whip Mommy.
Well, that's what she is. She's gonna wrap her whip around your neck as she steps on your body. She pours milk on you or something. I don't know.
Milk?
I don't know. This is I imagine milk going down black leather. Down her whip or something. I don't know.
We're earning the explicit tag now. Can't even bleep all that out.
We'll cut it out. That Patreons, if you hear this, we don't have a Patreon. Wait. I don't know who's going to hear this.
Oh, man.
Twitter?
Anyway, Twitter will. Oh, God. Okay, on that note, Fair, where can everybody find you on social media?
You all can find me at Feyerbrand on pretty much all social medias. I am fairly active on most, just trying to see, you know, what's working for me out there on each one. And you guys want to talk more about this live with me, you can check out my Twitch, which is Feyerbrand. If you want to chat more about this more passively, you can, there's always Discords and stuff. And I run a Game of the Month club as well as a Final Fantasy trophy hunting club. So lots of goodies. Links for all of that stuff will be in our descriptions.
And if you're enjoying the podcast, please check us out at magusbrothers.com and on Twitter at Magus Brothers. Brothers, if you love the podcast or are enjoying what you're hearing, please share with your friend, coworkers, family, your pets,
your dog,
your imaginary friends,
the dogs you shoot off your arm.
Yeah, the dog you shoot off your arm. Share the podcast and, leave us a review, rate us. They are very important to the algorithm. Comment on the YouTube section. Please jump in our Discord and create a dialogue with us. Those interactions really help the algorithms, and we love to hear and see from you.
Yes, it'll be great.
Until next time, we will be talking more about Final Fantasy VIII for another couple episodes, talking about characters, music. There's more to look forward to if you're enjoying 8. Until then, though, bye.